92 deaths, 2,623 bullets, tracking every Chicago police shooting over the 6 years, according to this article that I read, and our guest Bobby Kimbrough is here to talk about. He's a law enforcement expert, 30 years in law enforcement, and wearing that badge as a black man, I'm sure it was an interesting time. Recently retired DOJ senior special agent, author of Surviving the Stuff, BobbyKimbrough.com. Bobby, you talked about how you had to see the world through different eyes, and you were taught as a law enforcement individual. It's not about black or white. It's not even about blue. It's about saying wrong and right, and standing up for those things. You know, I got to ask you, when you go into a certain neighborhood, and we'll grab some of the calls here in a second, but when you go into a certain neighborhood, isn't it fair to know that certain crime, especially when you look at statistics, and as a police officer, you know which neighborhoods you're in, you're much more likely to encounter a dangerous situation or a criminal, somebody that might even want to harm you than you would in other different neighborhoods, right?
Well, you know, two things I want to comment on quickly that you spoke of. When you talk about some of the incidents that have happened previously, and we said they were minority shootings, think about this for a second. How would you like to have gotten a call that even though those shootings are far in between where they're wrong, that it was a loved one of yours? And as law enforcement officials, because someone disrespects us doesn't mean that I've got to take their life. And then to move on to your question that you just asked me about going into certain areas, here's the thing that I say to that, is that my first duty assignment was Detroit. West Bloomfield Hills is totally different from what the Cass Corridor is. There's two different areas, two different places.
Sure.
They speak two different languages. But here's the thing. You'll get dead in any part of the country, as you will in, as we refer to as, crime-ridden areas. So you do yourself a disservice as a law enforcement official to go into a certain area and say, just because I'm here, I'm safer. That is not even critical thinking. So what I'm saying is that as an officer, I go into every area with the objectivity. If I don't have objectivity, I go in there with subjectivity. Then I'm going to subjectively go in there with preconceived ideas, thinking that because this is a crime-ridden area, everybody here is a criminal.
But
so
Bobby, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and maybe that works in a fantasy world to say that we're all going to, you know, we're all just, everybody's equal and not going to be able to, but you have to be able to prejudge as a cop, right? That's the thing that you do. Your gut tells you, and you got to really lean on that. That gut instinct's there for a reason. I don't care. It shouldn't matter whether a person's black, white, Hispanic, or anything.
I go into that area, and my mind is prejudge. I'm sizing the situation up, but I'm not going to let what I see determine how I treat you unless you give me just cause. It's called behavior experience. If you give me a certain experience, I'm going to give you a certain behavior. So when I go into the area, when I would go into the Cass Corridors and I was buying heroin and crack cocaine and I meet a certain person on the street, I didn't assume that every person I met was a criminal. I greeted them until they showed me differently. No, you can't say because I'm in this area and I know this is a crime-ridden area, then my spider sense is going to go up and I'm going to treat them a certain way. No, you go into that area being aware of your surroundings, being aware of what's in front of you, whose hands, where they are, and this, that, and other. You take that and place it in your head, and at the same time, you treat that individual with a certain degree of respect until differently. I can't come in there and because you're there say I'm going to treat you a certain way. No.
No. Well, listen, I don't necessarily mean because they look or act a certain. Well, I do mean act a certain way. And Bobby, let me just be blatantly honest with you. When when police are pulling folks over on the side of the road, you know there are certain things that you're looking for. Yeah, you're targeting. So, you know, race isn't necessarily going to be one of those, but you are looking for certain things. I have a friend, when I was down in Mississippi, he was part of the drug task force, and they pulled folks over on I-10 all the time. And one of the things that he talked to me about, certain things that they could nail down to with, like, you know, if you had this and this other thing, you're getting pulled over because the percentage of the fact that you were trafficking drugs was through the roof, and they knew that if they pulled you over, chances are they were going to find drugs. So this is this is what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about, look, hey, if you're in a certain neighborhood and a certain person's acting a certain way, don't you have to be don't you have to be a little bit? I mean, your number one goal as a police officer when you leave is to survive, come home, right? Is to come home that night.
Right, but here's the thing. Here's the mistake with that. We were coming up 85 from Atlanta, coming through South Carolina, in Atlanta working a covert operation. Me and another black agent. We were pulled over in South Carolina. The guy stopped us. He had no reason to stop us.
Yeah,
we asked him, but let me finish. When we asked him, why did you stop us? He couldn't give us a justified reason. And here's the problem.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Had we not had them shiny gold badges that said special agent, guess what?
Yeah.
We would have had a problem. He would have worked a way to search our car for whatever reason. But here's the problem. What I'm saying is that I understand the identifiers. I understand how that works in the real world.
Sure.
I get it. I lived it for 30 years. What I'm saying to you is that those identifiers sometimes has to have qualifiers.
Sure.
So you can't just assume because I'm black and I'm driving up the road with an earring in my ear and I'm in a hoopty or something, there's 100,000 plus, whatever the case. If you stop me, there's a certain level of respect that you should show me until I show you otherwise. Then the problem that I'm saying where the problem goes wrong is when you stop me and right away you go from 0 to 100. That's a problem.
I agree. I 100% agree. I think that there should be respect both ways. But I think the problem is that we don't see that respect.
Exactly. And that's what the training is about.
And it's on both sides. There are both sides.
We've got to go back to the community. We've got to have community involvement from the clergy, from the mother in the community, the fathers in the community. We got to have conversation with everybody. This has to be a holistic approach. We can't fix it just by fixing the police. We've got to fix one another, because if we don't stand together, we're going to fall together. This is becoming to be a common occurrence. We've got to have the man in the mirror conversation. What role do I play in this? What role does my biases and my prejudices come to play in this?
Let me go to Bobby Kimbrough. Thank you. Let me go to John, who's on the phone here. We're going to get some calls in here. 616-774-2424, because there's a lot of what I hear, Bobby, that I agree with you, but there are things that I also disagree with you on, and I think it's healthy to have this conversation. John,
that's what makes us great.
Yep, absolutely. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Great. You're on with Bobby.
Hey, Bobby. I appreciate your 30 years in law enforcement. I just recently retired. I had 14 years in the local West Michigan agency, urban community. Totally understand what you're talking about, but I completely disagree with you. I think, law enforcement has changed. It sounds to me like you've been off the street for a significant portion of your career, and violent offenders have been re-released in the, new age of early paroles, and traffic stops to become much more dangerous than what they were 20, 30 years ago.
Well, that's a fair point. And John, hang on the phone. Bobby, how much is that affecting? Because we do have, there's a lot of that. Go ahead.
John, I appreciate your service as well. The problem that you made is I haven't been off the streets only but 30 days. I retired July the 22nd. I spent every other day out in the streets, out in communities that are violent. I'm talking about major drug traffickers. I'm talking about everything from Charles Little Millers to organized. I'm talking about mafia-type criminals.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about cartel. So trust me, I know what violence is. I know what danger is.
What about his point, Bobby? What about his point? Because this is a fair question. What about the release of these folks, violent offenders, things like that?
I get that. I'm saying that I agree with some of the people that are being released shouldn't be released.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are on the same page on that, John. We're on the same page on that. What I'm saying is that we can't go to the table because I'm in a black neighborhood and go in there with a heavy hand. And if, John, if you were to be truthful, and just you and me talking, brother, shield to shield, if you were to be truthful and be honest would you say that there's a different type of policing that takes place in Bloomfield, West Bloomfield, and took place in what we would say the cash corridors?
Oh, I'm sure there is. But if me personally,
if you say you're sure there is, then the question becomes why? Because they're people.
Well, Bobby, doesn't it have to be? The crime rates are completely, you're talking about completely, most of the folks, yes, most of the folks in those areas, even though they're crime-riddled, most of them are good. It's because of the bad eggs that are there that could take your life at any moment. There are more of those folks than there are in West Bloomfield. Trust me, and you know that.
With individuals. We got to deal with individuals. We can't, all I'm saying is we got to stop painting the brush so broad and saying that because you live in a certain area, you must be a criminal. Therefore, when I approach you, I'm going to approach you as a high felon. That's what I'm saying.
But I would say that a West Bloomfield officer would police differently than a Detroit officer because of their interactions are different with different types of residents. Now,
would you agree that you don't get more respect? If you stop a man when you were on the street, for your 14 years, when you were on the street, did you find you got more respect when you gave respect to someone, or if you just came?
It didn't matter who I talked to. I gave respect. 100%.
Exactly. So you know what? I want to applaud you for that. Because I have been on the streets with task force officers, TFOs that are assigned to the federal government. I have been on the street with people who right away show no respect from the word go.
Well, we're on the same page about that because someone who abuses a badge needs to give it up.
And thank you, John. That's all I'm saying is that when we find people who abuse the badge, we've got to get rid of them.
Amen.
And what I'm saying is that we got to start addressing, law enforcement is one large entity. We got to start addressing the individuals. When we find individuals that abuse the badge, mistreat their authority, we got to get rid of them. When we go into communities, let's treat the people fair. If they're criminal or criminal activity, let's do our job.
And I don't disagree with you. I just think that 99.9% of law enforcement is very good in portraying. And I think the way our media is portraying law enforcement in this broad stroke, as you've been using, is that all law enforcement shootings are bad and that body cameras and patrol cameras have 99.9% of the time are proving that they're good shoots or good use of force.
Sure.
There are very small percentages that are bad incidents. Like there was that one in South Carolina, North Carolina.
Sure.
Absolutely. That was a murder. That was a homicide. That guy should spend the rest of his career in prison. You know, but those good shoots, you can't second guess people 5 seconds after it happens
and to
say that their hands were up when they weren't. And those people who lie need to be prosecuted and put in prison.
To your point, John, and I think that's interesting as well. But to your point, and I'll just say this, Bobby. I mean, we see this media narrative because the story's already written that they send these police reports out, or not police reports, but media reports out of what happened in the shooting before they even have the facts right. And it's how they word these things that get people fired up, even if the officer was justified. I mean, how many times does a police officer need to be shot or attacked in order for him to be able to? Because it feels like these folks want to say, well, he needs to at least be shot once, maybe twice, just to make sure that wasn't an accident, just before he's able to shoot the perpetrator.
No, that's crazy.
No, I know. That's what we're seeing because we see this media narrative, this narrative that plays out. This is any and all of these shootings are unjust. I got to take a break. Here, John. Let me ask you though, what was your reason for retiring?
Took another position in another agency within the state. So,
was it a safer job? Was it a safer job?
Absolutely. I walked away from law enforcement because of the way it's changing.
Interesting. John, and it sounds like you're a good person, and unfortunately, we need more good people out there serving, and I appreciate
John, I appreciate your service and your honesty, brother.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks for calling in. Bobby, hang on one second. We'll be right back with you. I want to talk about what you need to do and what you need to know about this book. Author is Surviving the Stop, BobbyKimbrough.com. Bobby Kimbrough is on the phone with us. We'll continue with your calls, too, next. It's 616-774-2424. I got the Tigers tickets. We'll give those away right after this.
Top of the hour News Radio Wood 1300 and 106.9 FM.
Telling West Michigan's most important stories. West Michigan Live is on News Radio Wood 1300 and 106.9 FM.
Hey, it's Justin Barkley. We got the Tigers tickets before we go here at the top of the hour. Bobby Kimbrough joins us. He's author of Surviving the Stop. 30 years in law enforcement. Working recently as a retired DOJ senior special agent. And, this article, 92 deaths, 2,623 bullets, tracking every Chicago police shooting over 6 years, is what really kind of started us kind of thinking and having this conversation. And, Bobby, I appreciate you being on. I was looking at some of the stats through the article. About 4 out of every 5 people shot by police were African-American males. About half of the officers involved in shootings were African-American or Hispanic. And the officers who fired weren't rookies, but on average had almost a decade of experience. Of the 520 officers who fired their weapons, more than 60 of them did so in more than one incident, and the number of shootings by police, hits and misses, declined over 6 years, which is interesting to me. This is the most interesting stat. From 2011 to 2015, from over 100 to less than half of that in 44 in 2015. So it does seem that this isn't a black or white issue, and I don't mean that, no pun intended there, but what this is really an issue with many different layers, and I think you've helped kind of paint that picture today.
Yeah, I think it's a starting place for us to start having conversation, more ongoing training. I've enjoyed the show this morning. I especially enjoyed talking with John because I was thinking as we went to break how a good officer left for a better paying job and a safer place. We're losing good officers like that because of a lot of issues. But to your point, it's a good starting place for us to have dialogue, real conversations, and real ongoing training.
Sure.
Because did you know that when you hire a police officer, the guy that you hire in 2005 that you give the polygraph to, you give the psychological to, is not the same guy in 2010.
Oh, yeah, I believe that.
And then, but here's the problem with that. There is no quarter, interval, 5-year, 3-year psychological check, periodic background checks. No. DOJ probably, from what I understand, is the only one that did every 5 years. They do what they call a background or a financial check and friends and relative check.
Your book, Surviving the Stop, your next book could be Surviving the Force, man, for everything that I think that you go through as a law enforcement officer. Let me ask you, when you talk about surviving the stop, what do folks need to know? Because I've been told by friends in law enforcement, family, there are a couple things. Every time I get pulled over, my light goes on, my windows go down, I put my hands on the steering wheel, and I'm very respectful, and I don't care who's stopping me, where I'm being stopped. Those are a couple things that I do because I realize I want to put those folks at ease that are coming to my door.
True. Just to piggyback off of what you said, currently we're doing training on called Surviving the Shield, where we're training and speaking with police officers how that badge that weighs a few ounces over the course of years can weigh you down and cause a lot of internal stresses, physical as well as psychological issues. But when you approach or stop by law enforcement officers, the first thing you want to do is realize that the individual is coming to check your vehicle or to interact with you. He doesn't know you. His main objective is to 1042, finish his tour of duty, and get back to his or her family. So what you need to do is be mindful of that and try to create what I call an atmosphere change. Because if you change the atmosphere, you can change the outcome. So by doing that, when that officer walks up on you, obey his or her commands. The objective is survive the stop and go on with your day. If you feel you've been violated or disrespected, the place is not on the side of the road home court because you're going to lose.
You know what? And I tell you that, and Bobby, we got to cut this short. I'm going to give people a link that can go to BobbyKimbrough.com, but I see that all the time. People want to have their argument right there on the street where really the court is the place to do that.
Monday through Friday.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Bobby Kimbrough, BobbyKimbrough.com, author of Surviving the Stop, and thank you for all your service in 30 years.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Appreciate it.